All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Inside in Tennis podcast, all part of the Believe Network. I am your host, Mitch Michals, and as always, this podcast is available wherever you get your shows, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, video versions available on the YouTube channel at Mitch Michals as well. One leg of the Sunshine Double is in the books. We have some Indian Wells cleanup to do, talking about the champions, Jannik Sinner and Aryna Sabalenka. And no better person to do that with me than the Hall of Famer, now a reoccurring guest on the show, second time getting the chance to talk to him, esteemed author, historian of the game, and now friend of the show, Steve Flink. Steve, welcome back to the podcast. Always excited to talk tennis with you.
Great to be back, Mitch. We got a lot to talk about, I think.
We do. And I do want to mention one thing first, because the timing is everything. And we got the chance to talk last year for the first time. And then it couldn't have been more than a week, maybe a couple of days after we had a great episode, which I encourage people in the archives to listen. But then I saw you on the video of Federer's surprise introduction with all those Hall of Famers like yourself kind of surprising him. So what was that experience like? I know it's going to be a huge year for the Hall of Fame, but being part of that and
it was
the
a lot of
surprise
fun.
announcement.
Yeah, I was very pleased. They invited all of us who are Hall of Famers, and obviously they didn't have time for all of us to talk to Roger, but it was just nice to be on there listening, watching his reaction, and then to be surrounded by all these luminaries, the likes of Everett and Austin and Navratilova and a whole slew of the top men, Boris Becker, and it was an all-star cast of Hall of Famers, all patting Roger on the back. I'm not sure anybody else could have managed that. When I say managed it, he didn't orchestrate it. I just mean the respect they had for him and being willing to show up and come on this Zoom call, Rod Laver as well, and to salute Roger for getting into the Hall of Fame. It was a nice moment. I was glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's going to be a great year with Roger and Mary Carrillo in the Hall of Fame. One of the things about Federer, and it was funny, I saw it was at Indian Wells a few days, saw the Hall of Fame setup, saw where you can leave messages, personalized messages the fans get to the Hall of Fame candidates. But what strikes me about Roger, among other things, why this guy's so special, is the appreciation for the history of the game. And I just hope, Steve, that we don't lose that with the future greats coming forward. It is pretty refreshing to see any athlete in any sport, but let alone one of the all-time greats, saying, how much he reveres the people that came before him.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I think I don't want to say it's rubbed off. I think Djokovic is really quite similar, and I think Rafa is too. I think all three of them, as they made history of the highest order, became more and more aware of their predecessors and all the great players that have made it possible for them. So I think they're going to carry that on too. But he set a certain tone early in his career with the reverence that he showed for great champions who preceded him. So it's nice to see it. I suspect, by the way, that when you see him on Newport in August accepting the honor, the eyes will not be dry. I'd be very surprised if he gets through the whole speech without not breaking down a bit, because he's just very emotional that way.
Yeah, we know. We love it. He's a crier, but we love it. It's great to see. So
well, you heard that probably. You probably heard that from Rosie Casals on that call that day.
Yeah.
She kidded him, said, "I know you're a crier, so bring your Kleenex," which was very funny. And I think he fully understood what she was getting at. He'll have a full pack of Kleenex.
It's going to be a great summer.
Yeah.
Hope that security, hope the stands are reinforced, because a lot of passionate Federer fans are going to be there. It's going to be great. And getting back to the topic at hand, Steve, Indian Wells 2026, before getting to the champions, I just thought, I said it last week, even before the tournament concluded, but this tournament was a slam dunk. It gave you the storylines you want. The action was incredible. I think it really did kind of plant the seeds for a great season. I thought start to finish, all the way up to the final, this was as good as any tournament we've seen in some time.
Yeah, I'd agree. We got very timely. We kind of needed it. I think about the end of the Australian was pretty special, with Carlos winning that harrowing 5-setter against Zverev and Djokovic beating Sinner in 5, and then a very good final between Djokovic and Alcaraz. And then, of course, the women had a good final too, so with Sabalenka and Rybakina. So that was a nice ending. But you're right. This one had it pretty much all the way through, and it concluded on a really high note with both finals. And it's just what you want to see. I mean, one of the most exciting moments for me by far was Fonseca, because we've been waiting for him. He's had too many injuries. He's been held back by the injuries. Hasn't been able to do himself justice, even though he climbed to about 35 in the world. We'd seen him make progress, but not quite at the rate we might have thought when he made that big splash at the Australian at the start of last year. Still won a couple of titles.
Yeah.
But the way that he played, the maturity that he displayed against Sinner in losing a match that was actually similar in some ways to the final, in that it was a 2 tiebreak match.
Mhm.
But it just was very special because he goes to the opening set tiebreaker, Fonseca, and he bailed himself out very nicely and break points at 3-all, 4-all in the set. You know, he could well have lost the set 6-3 or 6-4. But he fought off a couple of break points, and then that enabled him to get there. And he goes up 6-3 in that breaker. And Sinner, of course, showed his class, his composure, his poise under pressure to win 5 straight points. And only one was a giveaway from Fonseca.
Right.
One was a forehand error that could have been prevented. The rest was stellar Sinner, I would call it. But then Fonseca goes down 5-2 in the second set. And he could have been forgiven for losing this match 6-3 and just say, well, I had a great first set. No, he didn't allow Sinner to serve out the match. He got back in. He took it to a tiebreak and here he went up 4-3 in the tiebreak, but then Sinner ran it out from there. But it was a really impressive performance, I thought.
Yeah.
He went toe to toe with Sinner. He blasted away with him. He looked very comfortable from the baseline with Sinner, and it was really just came down to those big points. The big point prowess of Sinner made the difference. So I thought, to me, that was that's back to your point of that we had these type of moments all the way through the tournament. We had Lerner Tien saving the couple of match points against Davidovich Fokina. That was great too. So there were very few times in the tournament where there were any lags. Not to mention we had Djokovic Draper. And I don't think Novak, I think it's sort of proven by him pulling out of Miami. I sensed that you saw him wearing the arm sleeve.
Yeah.
He went 2-3 setters leading into the match with Draper. And I never felt like he was serving quite up to par, or I don't think any part of his game was 100%, but he got inspired for that match. Draper, someone he had said a couple of days ago, I think on Tennis Channel, you know, he wants to see if these guys can beat him. He was funny about that, kind of like and I know exactly what he means. It's just prove you're good enough. And obviously Draper did, but that was just a spellbinding match because look, Novak almost had him in straight. He won the first, and then he had him. He came back from a breakdown in the second. Played a surprisingly loose game at the start of the second to lose his serve, but got the break back for 3-all, held for 4-3, and almost broke again, had deuce in the next game. Draper, to his great credit, really stood his ground there and then broke Novak in the following game, saved a break point in the following game, and wins the set. And then, of course, we had the point in the first game of the third set. The point, 26 strokes, and Draper drop-shotting Novak, had him on a yo-yo, running all over the court. Well, the most amazing part of the point was Djokovic chasing down that lob from Draper. It was a perfect lob into Novak's forehand corner. He chased it down and put back a very deep lob himself, as only he can. Obviously, he eventually wins it with a little bit of luck with his backhand crosscourt grazing the net cord, but that's when he was down on his back on the court while everybody in the stands was on their feet cheering. And I thought what made that remarkable, too, was he managed to get through that game, even though he was really fatigued by that point. As he said later, he was really gassed. And then he got broken the next time, but he bided his time. He made sure not to go 2 breaks down. He waited and just got his holds as quickly as he could. And then when Draper served for it, he sensed maybe that Jack might tighten up, and Jack did. But then again, this is what makes tennis so fascinating. Djokovic gets the break, holds for 6-5, and he has 30-all, and tried a drop shot that didn't work, and Draper hit too good a pass. But the point is, you would have thought maybe at that point Draper's done.
Right.
Not quitting, but just too distraught by not serving the match out. But he digs in, he holds. Then he's up 3-1 in the tiebreak, but Djokovic goes up 4-3, and then Jack finally wins at 7-5. But that I think the crowd was so animated, and it was such a highly charged atmosphere. And I think it was one of those matches that was great with the crowd. I'd say obviously more for Novak. He was now the sentimental favorite, but they appreciated Draper.
They did.
They knew here's the defending champion, and that was another highlight. And that was the nature of the tournament. That's a round of 16 match.
Right.
round of 16, and then Draper, obviously. Then we have the another moment with Medvedev and the incident.
It was, yeah. There was so much, and I think a lot to get to with that. But you had two favorites, or the women's favorite and the men's number two. But we all know top two separated themselves. They win the tournament, Steve. But it didn't feel like just a slow march like maybe Australia did, where you had all this drama before, where there was some doubt in there. And then we saw, obviously Alcaraz lose, upsets Iga on the women's side. So I think when you have the best of both worlds, it provides the best amount of tennis. And Stadium One got classic match after classic match, it seemed. But I'm totally with you with Fonseca. We wanted to see, I think tennis fans and sports fans can be a little impatient at times, to say the least. But to see him show the signs that he is on track to push the best. And the best way to understand that from my viewpoint, Steve, is Sinner understood this was a real threat out there. He knew he had to lock in to beat him. And that says all I need to know about how the rest of the tour feels about Fonseca.
No, and Sinner made a comment afterwards about this was the first time you could tell he wanted to. I don't want to put it, I don't mean as a negative, but he wanted to get the first match over with, in the sense of, I want to know what it's like to play this kid. I've seen him.
Mm-hmm.
He looks dangerous. I want to find out once and for all for myself. And he comes away with a good feeling, but also knowing full well that Fonseca's not afraid of him, and that Fonseca is going to improve markedly in the next couple of years. So Jannik is going to have to keep raising the stakes against him. That doesn't mean, we know, obviously, Mitch, that it's no automatic that the next three times they play, Fonseca plays matches like that, but it just gives him the encouragement for the long run to feel like he can compete with Sinner. So I love watching it.
Seeing Draper back in the mix was great too. You hope these guys stay healthy, that they're able to push the best, which is why the men's tournament was so fascinating. And I want to get into the final right now, Steve, because
just a quick interjection, Mitch, if I may. That Draper, you touched on something important. He's still getting his sea legs. You can tell that physically he wasn't quite there, which is one of the reasons why he lost to a letter perfect Medvedev in the first set, 6-1.
That was a tough schedule too, like having to play the next day.
It was, but I think Draper later in the season would be more up to it. At this stage, he wasn't quite ready, although he acquitted himself much better in the second set, which was 7-5. And we had that awkward moment with Daniil asking for the replay and calling hindrance and winning his argument, which, by the way, I just want a quick aside on that. I think it was a wrong decision to me by the umpire.
Why are they allowed to play out the point? That's my thing. Like, I'm never going to. An athlete wants to seize a moment, they're going to go for it. It's up to the umpire to say no. I just don't think that should be allowed. He should have to throw his hands up like a challenge the moment he sees it, and then maybe you review it. That was my biggest thing.
I like your thinking there, but let's just say we even give them the latitude. We allow them to wait out to the end of the point. I expect the umpire to review the point and say, wait a second. That was the fourth shot of the rally. The fourth shot.
Yeah.
He hits a ball that Medvedev hits a forehand. It looks long to Draper, and he's got his hands up there, but just briefly. He doesn't stop playing. Then they play it. It goes to 12 strokes before, it's like, okay, wait a minute. How can if he'd really been distracted, I think Daniil might have stopped. So I'm just saying, common sense tells me that she should have looked at it and said, no, that had no bearing on the point. Daniil, and just watch the way Daniil reacted. After Draper reacted, thinking that other shot had been, it just didn't make any sense to me that she would say, you did something that wasn't normal. That was different. Well, anybody, as Draper said, players do that all the time because it's a carryover from pre-electronic lines days where, they're looking over to the lines and why didn't you call that? So it's perfectly understood. It's a reflex, but he didn't prolong it. And if he had, I get it. But Daniil, I feel like Daniil has many good qualities. And you're right, players can go for it. But I thought that was calculated. He was rewarded in the end. But I like the fact that he said to Draper at the net, I don't feel great about it. Because I think it dawned on him, maybe he thought he would lose the appeal. He'd get his chance to appeal, and he thought he'd lose it. And I think he did feel badly in a sense. But anyway. Just wanted to, I think you and I see it essentially the same way.
Yeah, I think it's fair for sure. Looking at the men's final of Indian Wells, though, with Steve Flink here on the Inside in Tennis podcast, it was Sinner over Medvedev getting his first Indian Wells title. Now joining the Big Four as members of the exclusive club, winning all the hard court titles in the Masters Series. It was just really phenomenal, Steve, to watch Sinner get back to doing what he does. I know he didn't have to play Alcaraz in this run, but locking in against Fonseca, dominant wins over both Leonard Tien and Alexander Zverev, and then playing an informed Daniil Medvedev, who wasn't giving him anything on Medvedev's own service games. The moments of the match for me for Sinner were those tie breaks, down 4-0 in the second, winning the last 7. His ability to, I mean, he's a great player all the way around, but to ramp up when he needs to, and at this point in his career, Steve, not throw away sets and games maybe that might be out of the realm of possibility for most. Jannik Sinner back where he belongs at the top of the game. A dominant win for a dominant champion.
No, all good points. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Look, he did something quite similar against Fonseca, and when he was down 6-3 in the first set tiebreak, and he runs off 5 points in a row. But that's Fonseca, who's younger, who doesn't have as much experience playing big matches against the leading players. So you can see how maybe he would have that sort of inner belief. But to do it to Medvedev, first of all, he was a bit lucky, I thought, Jannik, in the first set tiebreak, because Daniil let that ball go. He was up at the net. He was in a good position to play a high forehand volley. Sinner's pass was not low. I can understand when there was a part of him thinks it's going long, but
it is a tough one, right? Like, I saw it in hindsight. We're all like, why did you not let that? Why did you not play that? What he's seeing, how fast that ball's going in that angle, I understand in a split second how you could get that wrong.
Yeah, you can, but I think it was something he regretted, and it was most likely he puts that volley away. But regardless, that would have given him double set points. So that was a big moment. Then you mentioned the second set tiebreak for Zip. And of course, that's when there was some concern. Jim Courier on the air was concerned that it was cramping from Sinner. In the end, I don't really think it was. I don't know, was he ever asked about that afterwards? I didn't see.
No, just all celebratory.
But there was no sign to me after that point. He looked okay, luckily. It would have been a shame if cramping had cost him the time, but it did surprise. He was brilliant those 7 straight points, no doubt about it. In turn, I was a little surprised that Daniil couldn't make more of that lead. You know, for him, guy serves as well as he does to lose that many points on your serve, because he served 2 starting at 4-1 and lost those, and then again from 4-5. So he lost 4 points on his serve without winning any in that span. That's surprising, and he had played also a brilliant tiebreak against Carlos the day before to beat him in the semis. Be that as it may, your point is well taken, because regardless of where Daniil was, as the British would say, found wanting, and it was frustrating for him that he may have been a bit. He was probably a little wearier than Sinner. He looked a bit worn out himself at that stage. Right. But it takes nothing away from Sinner, because he still has to be letter perfect and
he does
deeply concentrated and right on his game to be able to pull off a 7, because he also, by the way, he doesn't want to go 3. He doesn't like the heat. No. He held up better than he had looked against Zverev the day before, or obviously in Australia, but neither one of those guys really wants to go 3, but Daniil has no choice. Jannik is like, I got to get it over with now. So yes, I agree with you. We saw the best side of Sinner again. I mean, after he had lost a heartbreaker to a great Djokovic in Australia, when Novak saved 16 out of 18 break points in the 5-setter, and then lost to Menchik, he really wanted to jumpstart his season. This was the time. This was the moment. And I think it was very important to him. He never won Indian Wells before, and I think he really wanted to get going and start feeling like himself again. Yeah. And the beauty of this is, if he gets Miami, it's nice. It's nice. He's on a real roll. But even if he doesn't win Miami, he'll go to the clay court season, I think, feeling it's just as long as he plays well in Miami and goes deep in Miami. Yeah, he'll feel very good about himself and that he's sort of getting back to the very best tennis he has to offer.
Yeah, he didn't play these events last year, which is another point to note, that he's getting like a proper run up to clay court season, and took the time. It was reported that after the loss to Menchik, he's like, I want to get to Indian Wells early, get a proper almost training block beforehand. I just think what's under the radar, what's underappreciated about Jannik is his ability after tough losses to hit that reset button and be fine. We saw that in Roland Garros famously last year. It was tough mentally, I'm sure, losing to Djokovic the way he did, as you mentioned, having all those chances, arguably being better for the course of that match. But he has that ability as a true professional to just, let's flush it.
You know what? I'm glad you brought that up because there's several instances of it. First, you mentioned Roland Garros. I mean, that's an all-time epic. He has triple match point in the fourth
Hmm.
set after
Yeah,
winning 16 out of 17 points to get there. He looks like he's going to run out the match blazing, and
yeah.
Carlos comes back and wins that match. It took tremendous resolve and composure and self-belief to then turn it around against Carlos, who's two-time defending champion Wimbledon, and beat him in four sets there in the final. Then we come to the summer and Cincinnati, and he wasn't right. He was sick when he played him that day in Cincinnati. But they go to the Open, and Carlos, as this even more decisively than Jannik beat him in the four setter Wimbledon, Carlos beats him at the Open, and Carlos again. Now you're starting to think again, boy, he's really having a problem. This rivalry, Carlos may continuously be in his head. But then in the year-end championships, Sinner
I guess
beats him
so.
in Turin. So I think that's to prove. I'm saying this to prove your point. He does have a great ability to let these losses roll off him and
Yes.
just get on with it. He's got one of the great temperaments. So what would that old cliche? What you see is what you get. This the Jannik Sinner with all that composure and all that self control on the court. I think that's how he is. He reasons. He's very reasonable off the court
Hmm.
too, so that he's able to get over it. And that's a very important quality in a champion because you're gonna take some tough losses here and
Yeah.
there. It's gonna happen. And he dealt with it, and now it looks like he's back in sync. So I think that
Hmm.
was about as timely a triumph as he could record.
Well, I don't want to devalue what the finalists did, and that's Daniil Medvedev's run to the final, getting through Jack Draper, beating Carlos Alcaraz in a match I don't think a lot of people called or really gave him much of a chance in. But for Medvedev, that particular match, just blitzing Alcaraz, being able to not just be more aggressive, but pick his spots and be timely aggressive. What I loved about that outcome, Steve, and what I loved about Medvedev's trajectory back in the top 10 is he's kind of providing a lot of people on the outside hope that, okay, there is a chance he could be a disruptor. Doesn't mean it's going to happen again in a slam, but what Medvedev offers to the game is so unique and different that I love his role as a disruptor in these matches. We could call him all these nicknames, the mad scientist, one of them, Steve, but he came up with a game plan that worked, and Carlos said it as well in the press conference. I was not expecting this or didn't see Medvedev ever play this good before. But what was your reaction to what Daniil did in that match and how he was able to overcome Alcaraz?
Yeah, no, those are all very interesting points you're making. Well, first thing, his last win over Carlos had been at the 23 U.S. Open. Now he didn't hit Carlos with this kind of an all-out assault that day. But he did play great. He
Yeah,
was inspired. He caught him off guard that day too, not with a
right.
performance quite of this magnitude, but a very impressive four-set win there at the Open. Uh, then obviously it hadn't gone right for him against Carlos since, and he'd lost these finals to him at Indian Wells. And all right, so nobody really thought he had a great chance coming in. But what I thought he did was very reminiscent of the first two sets against Sinner in the 24 Australian Open. And everybody talks about how it was a necessity there
Because he
because
had
he
no
was
legs. Yeah.
exhausted, all the five setters. But my disappointment following that match was I was hoping Medvedev would try to play that play that way basically. And I'm not suggesting that he had to hit every ball as hard as he can or that it had to be just nothing but big hitting. But I
Hmm.
thought he might do that more often against the top players following that loss to Sinner, that it maybe set off a light bulb. It triggered something inside him to say, you know what, I can play that way. I can be more aggressive and still hardly miss. But even those two sets against Sinner, I'm not sure quite compared to what we saw against Carlos. Not to mention, we saw Medvedev, and he wasn't quite as good on serve on Sunday, despite not getting broken. There was no breaks in that final, so nobody can say he didn't serve well. He did. He faced a couple of break points in the first set, and that was it. But I felt like against Carlos, the serving, particularly in the first set, was devastating, and
Yeah.
that had been a concern for Medvedev, for his camp of supporters, and I think he's got many. People kind of understand he's a different kind of character, and I think people out there kind of enjoy him, and they know that when he was at his best, and when he beat Djokovic at the 21 U.S. Open, and all through that span, 21, 22, 23 into 24, the serve
Was part of it. Yeah.
was a bit was not talked about enough.
Hmm.
The first serve was a huge weapon, and he needed it because, especially the way he was playing then, with not being this aggressive, he needed some free points, and he got them.
He did.
Well, the serve was terrific particularly good against Carlos, very, very good against Jannik too. And I thought that also surprised Carlos, that he couldn't quite figure out where to position himself on the second serve returns. He didn't have much of an idea where the first serve was going, and Daniel was able to control it. Now it got tougher in the second set because he went down the break, 3-1, got it right back, and then had some difficult service games later, including 4-5, where he was saved 2 set points. But still, coming up with big serves when he needed them, and then in the tiebreak. I love that long break where he took extra time. He stood and took a long sip of water and walked over, changed ends of the court, and served a perfect, perfect serve to go 6-1, and then closes out with an ace down the tee. At 6-3, another ace down the tee. He just took his time, picked his spots, and hit them on a dime. So the combination of the serving and the incredible power and control off the ground, because he used the backhand down the line so well against Carlos. And then when he had a chance to lean in and rifle that flat backhand cross court, he did it. And he had Carlos on his heels, and he had Carlos confused. And I think Carlos's comments after were very revealing, saying he'd never seen him play like that. And he didn't mean that as a put down. It was a compliment. He just admitting that he was caught off guard. And that's only the third time he's beaten him in 9 career meetings, and you can almost throw out the first one. And Carlos wasn't really
the first Wimbledon,
then the Wimbledon win, it doesn't mean much. But the U.S. Open 23 was the only one that of real note, and it hadn't happened since then. So you're right. Your notion about him being a disruptor, if he had gone out and lost badly to Sinner in the final, it might have taken some of the sense of progress away.
Almost like Zverev against Sinner. Like that's kind of how we feel about that match.
Yeah, very.
Like it feels like it's getting, like it's slipping away. Like it's getting, the gap is widening. Whereas after that performance by Medvedev, you can't say that at all. Like there's
that's a good analogy. Yeah, I was very disappointed. Zverev had an easy time. He'd had one tough match against Nakashima, but otherwise he was rolling, and he'd beaten Fees easily. So he certainly was rested. And he's talked about how he wants to play more. I think the problem he's got, Mitch, is that particularly if he's playing an informed Jannik, and obviously Carlos too, but okay, it's nice to say I'm going to be more aggressive. I'm no longer going to lose because I'm too timid. I'm going to hit through that forehand. I'm going to flatten it out. And if I lose, I'm going to lose on my terms by playing the way I would really like to play, freed up.
Right.
But I think the problem is, I honestly think that forehand is always going to be an issue, that there'll be some days where it's better than others, but that when he forces himself to go for more, there are days where it breaks down. And this was one of them. And Sinner sensed that, and he exploited it. And it's not that it's a terrible weakness, but it's not the reliable weapon that we see from a Djokovic or Sinner or most of the time with Carlos, because Carlos did have a slightly off day on his forehand against Medvedev, but obviously it's a great stroke that he can almost always count on.
And Alcaraz has a lot of tools too, so it's course.
But I think it's a catch-22 with Zverev. You want to play that way, but sometimes you're not gonna pull those shots off. You're gonna miss too much, and this was a very disappointing match, because going in, I thought it would at least be close. I thought he might even take a set. I wasn't thinking he'd win, but I thought it was important for him to show that he could make it hard fought, tight, and up for grabs. But it just wasn't. And then that was with Jannik suffering a bit in the heat in both sets. He had stages in both sets where he was really literally feeling the heat. And I think Zverev could see that. But so I think you're right. It has to really disturb him that perhaps the gap is widening. So what does he do? I mean, Carlos is going to keep getting better. He had his opportunity against Carlos with Carlos cramping in Australia and couldn't quite get that done. And he was exhausted at the end, I understand, but he served for the match and couldn't win there. So the question going forward is, what does he do about these two guys? And I think he knows he's got a real dilemma on his hands. He can feel like he's got a good shot against anybody else, although Novak if Novak gets healthy again, he certainly will have no easy time with him either. So
Yeah, it's gonna be tough.
that was maybe one of the more disappointing moments in turn. Taking nothing away from Sinner, I think we just all wanted a closer
Yeah.
contest between Zverev and Sinner, and we did not get it. But conversely, Daniil in the final, again, if he'd lost 3-3, 3-2, or if he'd just gotten clocked,
Might have
he
been
would have felt
different.
like,
Yeah.
well, what did yesterday really mean? But I think he can
Mhm.
come away instead and say, you know what? If I'd just been a little better on those big points, if I hadn't let that ball, if I'd made a slightly better judgment on that 5-4 point in the tiebreak in the first, if I could have just been played a little tighter, a little more solid after 4-love in the tiebreak in the second, I might have won that match. I had great chances to win both sets. I never lost my serve, which he's got to be very pleased about, by the way. To
Mhm.
do that against Sinner is very difficult. So there's so many positives that he takes with him.
Mhm.
I suspect he'll do very well in Miami, and with a good Miami, he might even have a decent, not necessarily a great clay court circuit because he never enjoys the clay as
Mhm.
much as he does on hard. But
Mhm.
it's put him on a good path. It's sort of reminded him of how good or even great he can be. And after what had happened, you figure there was a 2-year span there, 23 to 25, doesn't even win a tournament, and now he almost got a third title of the season here,
I know.
and so he's all of that. He's got to feel good about it. I think that this tournament was a big step in the right direction for Medvedev.
Certainly was. It was a crowning achievement for Jannik Sinner as we move along here on the Inside in Tennis podcast with Hall of Fame writer Steve Flink, looking at the women's title. Epic final. One of the best women's matches you'll ever see. Sabalenka taking on Rybakina, and Sabalenka gets revenge. Beats Rybakina, first Indian Wells title, saves a match point, wins in the third set tiebreak, and gets that exclusive, elusive Indian Wells title. I thought this match had everything. It was, I think, marginally better, if not more, than their Australian Open final. The quality was good. Both players were playing their best at times, were feeling the pressure at others. But in the end, Steve, Sabalenka dug deep when she needed to, found the winner on match point, won both points on Rybakina's serve, and then closed it out. It was a much needed win for a player who essentially has it all, but had a Rybakina problem, was able to overcome it on this Sunday.
Yeah, she'd done that once before against her, actually from quadruple match point down. She can be awfully tough in the crunch, Sabalenka, but you're right. The timing was crucial because WTA finals, she's closing a year where she's clearly the number one player, loses the first set. They go to a tiebreaker and she gets absolutely destroyed in that tiebreak and loses in straight sets. Then they go to Australia and she's up 3-love in the third, Sabalenka is, and Rybakina comes back, turns the tables on her there. So if she were to lose a third straight, very significant final, it could really weigh on her mind. I think this was a real testament to Sabalenka's ability and to stay calm. She had a few moments where she kind of emoted a bit and got a little frustrated, but they were really minor and infrequent, very infrequent. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, look, she was in real trouble having lost the first set and badly outplayed in the first set. Rybakina was totally on song in the first set. She was magnificent. Timing off her forehand was perfect. She served well. She moved the serve around. Sabalenka didn't really have a clue how to stop her there. And then immediately goes down that break in the second. But then uh, got that break back and won a series of hard-fought close games. That second set could have gone the other way, but good effort from Sabalenka to sort of shift the momentum there, win that set, and then to go up the early break in the third after Rybakina had a 40-love lead, and
Yeah.
so serving for the match, you had to like her chances. But Rybakina, you could see that in the preceding games, Mitch, those service games leading up to Sabalenka serving for the match, on Rybakina's serve, she started to hold easily.
Yeah.
That helped because now she's thinking, okay, you got one more chance. You got to take it.
And she
Played
was
great
getting
game.
closer on the break too. The right before she had chances and didn't
Yeah,
convert
she
them.
did.
So
Oh yeah, she did.
yeah.
But then she just another quick hold and she says,
Mhm.
okay, I can still do this. And she got almost every return back. Didn't try to do too much with her turns, kept them deep. She really pinned Sabalenka back and earned that break. But then had to fight up all those break points, the 5 break points in the next game. Very gutsy hold from Rybakina, but once more, we see, it reminded me a bit of Draper when he was at 5-6 in the third against Djokovic and things looked like they had turned. And here's Sabalenka had not been able to serve it out at 5-4. She's now serving to stay in it. She played a very good game to get to the breaker. And then we had Rybakina up 5-3 in the breaker, and Sabalenka fights back to 5-all, only to have Rybakina hit that brilliant backhand down the line winner. That's when I thought it was over. But once again, Sabalenka, what amazed me was she made on the match point, she made a great backhand return. Rybakina didn't do a bad job of answering with a cross-court backhand of her own, but then Sabalenka just completely went for broke and hit it cleanly and hit it well. There was nothing lucky about it. It was bold and it was brave, and she pulled off the backhand cross-court winner. And I think as they changed ends, Mitch, that was fascinating because now they're both thinking about that point, particularly Rybakina thinking, oh my God. And she got a short return from Sabalenka on the next point and approached on the forehand. And Sabalenka obviously didn't think she had the angle to pass her clean, so she just hit it hard. And there was a kind of a wobbly volley from Rybakina that went long, and then Sabalenka closes it out. I think for the sake of the rivalry, I'm glad it happened. I want to see those two go back and forth. I suspect they will. But as you said at the outset of this segment, this was one that Sabalenka needed this. She needed it more than Rybakina. Rybakina would have loved to have done it again. But this will make Sabalenka realize, okay, these matches may often go down to the wire, but I've got to be willing to do that. I can't allow myself to get frustrated and show all this angst. So I just thought she won the match mentally as much as anything else, because I thought on tactical terms, I think they both played a great match. Your initial comment again, was it better than Australia? Was it just a little better or a lot better? I'd say decidedly better, which is a compliment to them, because there was nothing wrong with the tennis they played in Australia. But this one was that much better to me, the caliber, particularly I'd say in the last set and a half.
Yeah.
And the third set was the best tennis of the match in a lot of ways. So I think it was great for women's tennis, and Sabalenka restores her faith in terms of the rivalry. But Rybakina doesn't leave that court saying, "Oh my God, how could I lose?" No, I think she's philosophical enough to say, "It didn't go my way, but I'm right in there with her. I had my chance."
Yeah, with all due respect to, and obviously all-time respect to Borg and McEnroe, this is like a new iteration of Fire and Ice, because you have such dynamic, different personalities, where Rybakina is just ice cold out there. And even in defeat, she's handling it well. On to the next one. She's not going to get down on herself. She's ready for the next opportunity to compete. And I look at Sabalenka, and this is another example, Steve. She's so consistent. She's been the most consistent player by far on the WTA for the last several seasons. But she thrives when there's stakes on the line, when there's some chaos, when there's a little adversity. Now you're seeing Sabalenka, who, for those of us that followed the game long enough, knew that this was kind of an insane thing to think about a couple years ago. But it's true that when there's stakes and when there's pressure, now she's handling the moment as well as ever. So I think, in a weird way, having lost a few matches to Rybakina kind of put her in a better position. She was ready for this opportunity, and she took advantage of it.
Yeah, well said. I think she knows that also, Mitch, that she can't afford to waste that emotional energy against somebody this good. Maybe in the early rounds, and she's angry at herself, she can emote, and it could be negative emotions, and then just move past it. But here, she can't. She has to have every ounce of emotional energy left. She's got to be. And so I think she went out there determined not to explode. I think that was part of her strategy. I can't let things bother me today. It has not helped me in the past. It didn't help me in Australia. Not that she imploded in Australia, but she was more emotional than she was yesterday.
For sure.
I think there was a lesson learned, and you're right. There's a contrast in personalities, but when to go back to Borg and McEnroe, when Borg played McEnroe in the center court, John learned that he felt like he was going to put himself in the worst possible position if he had one of his tantrums. So he often was on his very best behavior. Not every time he played Borg, but often. And in the center court finals of 80 and 81, when he lost the epic in 80 and beat Bjorn in 81, he behaved remarkably well for John. And I think that's something that, there's another parallel, because I think Sabalenka, go ahead and let loose when you're playing others or lesser opponents or people you're better than. but
Yeah,
she realizes that Rybakina is right up there on the same level as her. So these matches are often going to come down to just a very few points.
yeah,
And the calmness. I mean, the fact that she had the composure to go for that backhand cross court. There was nothing reckless about it. She hit it so perfectly. And
perfect.
that was again a tribute to her demeanor.
Yeah. Want to shout out again, semifinalist, tour leader, and match wins, Elena Svitolina. Another great run in Indian Wells, pushing Rybakina in that tie break. Linda Noskova, who's a teenager, or who's not a teen anymore, but is someone that's getting perennially overshadowed, is into the top 15. She makes the semifinals. But it was Rybakina and Sabalenka, Steve. And just the final note on this final in this tournament, it appears from my viewpoint that there is a little bit of distance now, that these are the top two players. At the moment, we'll see. But at the moment, these are clearly the top two players in the women's game.
Yeah, I agree. I agree far and away. I will only add that I think Coco will reemerge soon. We know how she has this ability. She goes through lulls, she goes through slumps, but she will strike somewhere sometime soon enough. And Pegula started the year off so brilliantly. Now I know she has an issue with both Sabalenka and Rybakina. They tend to
I feel like the
overpower in
rest
their
of the tour does too, but yeah,
like
she
it.
at the top
But
does.
Jess
Yeah,
is dealing with everybody else, is
yeah,
my point.
yeah.
So, and I think she's got a great attitude, and on the year she's been the third best player.
Mhm.
So, but you're right. That doesn't mean that there still isn't a gap between the two of them and her. There is, and Pegula would be the first to admit it. But I do think the two Americans are going to still be in the forefront, challenging these two. It's just that to beat them. I mean, as if Sabalenka and Rybakina stay healthy. Look, I don't know about the French because would clay be the best surface for either one of them? No, although Sabalenka of the two, I think, is more comfortable on the clay than Rybakina. But I could see them playing the Wimbledon final. I could see them playing the U.S. Open final. It wouldn't shock me at all if they ended up having a ended the season having played three title round contests at the majors.
It's going to be tough, but these challenges are why we watch the sport, to see who can step up. We've got some young talent coming up as well, and there's some veterans that don't want to go. So,
But you know what, Mitch?
yeah,
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt
yeah,
you. Just
yeah.
don't want to lose this thought. I think this is good for women's tennis. We've seen a lot of fluctuating form and some musical chairs and players getting hot and winning one major and disappearing. The idea that a major rivalry like this could develop, where we might see them meet often on the big occasions and keep pushing each other to the hilt. I think that's a great thing for women's tennis.
I do as well. I think we have rivalries. It's great in sport. Yeah, there could be fatigue if it's just the same two. I don't think with the depth of the top 10, it's always going to be the case in women's tennis right now, but I think we're in a great spot where these two have separated themselves. And if we see it in a big match, it seems to deliver more often than not. So I'm thrilled at what we got in this matchup. And it was a great week all around. Want to go and put a bow on the show by talking about how, we have Miami coming up, the second leg of the Sunshine Double, Steve. I know the rain's coming, so hopefully we get some dry days in Miami and they could play. But the interesting time in the tennis calendar, right? We go to Miami for this mini hard court swing before it's clay season. And yet these two tournaments, as you well know, couldn't be much more different than they are given the conditions and given the courts themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Might be slower in Indian Wells, although not as slow as usual this year, which I think Medvedev appreciated, by
He
the
did.
way. As you know, how in the
Yeah.
past he was not enamored of those courts, despite
Mhm.
a couple of great, showings there in the past. Yeah, Miami, obviously totally different. Some player. Also, it's a tough turnaround. Even with the days off, I mean, it's not Canada, Cincinnati, but it is still difficult because you gotta go from the West Coast to Florida, and
Mhm.
now you got this humidity that you didn't have in the desert. Yeah, I don't know what to expect, except that I do think Medvedev will got this boost, and I expect him to really. I think both Medvedev and Sinner are both. I'd be really shocked if they didn't both make the semis.
Mhm.
That is one prediction. I expect to see them in the semis. I don't know what to expect from Carlos because it's not that this is going to be a devastating loss for him. It's his first loss of the year. But a part of Carlos has to be thinking about conserving a certain. I think he wants to get through the clay court season, unlike some of these seasons gone by, a little more unscathed. I don't think he
Yeah.
wants to be dealing with an injury in the clay court season again and having to pick and choose and having to maybe pull out of a tournament or two. So
Yeah.
part of that might depend. I think he's going to be tempted as we speak. He's still in Miami, but a part of him might be tempted to skip it in order to to sort of prioritize the clay. So I'm not.
Right.
So I don't. And then if he does go, I don't know. Is he going to be that hungry? Will he be fully motivated as opposed to, obviously in the back of his mind, the next major is Roland Garros, and he wants to do really well on the clay leading up to that. So I'm less certain about what to expect from him in Miami than I am from Sinner and Medvedev.
Yeah, just at the time of this recording, we don't know what the draw is. Medvedev's into the top 10. Hopefully, he's not in the center section.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. You're right. No, obviously my prediction hinges on that. But as long as they're not colliding sooner, I like them both getting to the penultimate round.
It's a great point about Alcaraz, though. When last year loses in the semi, same spot. I know it's one match. We're not going to overreact. He's got bigger things on the agenda, right? But you look at it last year, right? He loses to Goffin in his first match.
Right.
Didn't seem very motivated. Didn't play a clean match, obviously, and then goes to clay and it's wins Monte Carlo and then we're off to the races. So, it's interesting.
And he remembers that. You can bet that if we remember it, he does too. And I think he'd rather not put a Goffin loss on his ledger.
Right.
He's got a lot of pride and he's become that much more consistent over the last year. But above all, I just think he wants to be sure that he paces himself through the clay court season, wins at least a title or hopefully 2 titles in his mind, and then goes to Roland Garros feeling like he's the clear favorite and ready to try to do it again there after 2 great years in a row on the Parisian clay.
It's going to be so fun to see what happens next. The tour just keeps turning. Miami's up next, and we'll see what happens if it's chalk or we have some renewed rivalries or some upsets, players making a statement. I can't wait to see what all shakes out, but Steve Flink, the Hall of Famer, always generous with your time. Last thing before I let you go, though, I understand that in a couple months we'll have a new book from you coming out.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. It's called The Immortals of American Tennis, and it'll be out in early August. And I go back to the Bill Tildens and Helen Wills Moody's all the way up to the present day. And, I wrote basically 3,000-word accounts on each of these great stars and tried to focus on what made them immortals, not simply their achievements, their impact on the game in a larger sense. It was a lot of fun to write it because it was a bit different than my book on the greatest tennis matches of all time or my Pete Sampras biography. Different kind of flavor, and different challenge. So I hope people enjoy it.
We started the podcast, we ended with the same thing, having that appreciation for the legends and the titans of the sport, especially if you're of a certain age or basically anyone alive for some of the people you're profiling that didn't get a chance to see them. So I think it'd be good to learn something about some people that were legends in their own right before any of us were around.
Absolutely. That was my goal. And I think I'm hopeful that there'll be some young readers out there that will say, I need to learn more about Tilden, a little more about Helen Wills, Maureen Connolly, Don Budge, Jack Kramer. I mean, in addition to reading about Stan Smith, Arthur Ashe, John McEnroe, Jimmy Connors, Chris Evert, Tracy Austin, etc. So it was a fun book to put together.
Can't wait to check it out myself. Steve Flink, member of the Tennis Hall of Fame, always welcome on this show. Thanks so much for joining the Inside in Tennis podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mitch. Enjoyed it.
That was Steve Flink. This was the Inside in Tennis podcast. A reminder that we're available on all your podcast platforms. So go to Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Amazon Music, if that's your platform of choice, and just search Inside in Tennis podcast. The show will pop right up and you can subscribe and leave a nice rating and a review if you're so kind. But when you subscribe, every episode's automatically downloaded to your listening device. And you can watch the video episodes on the YouTube channel at Mitch Michals as well with Steve Flink and all of our outstanding guests. So on behalf of Steve Flink, my name is Mitch Michals. This was the Inside in Tennis podcast. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you soon. Enjoy the tennis at Miami and beyond.